You know those moments that just hit you out of nowhere? Well, this one started at a family dinner. My sister publicly humiliated me in front of her wealthy boyfriend, calling me a loser, even though I'd been supporting her lifestyle for years. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I cut her off financially. And trust me, it only escalated from there. But before we dive in, I gotta ask, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious. By the time I finally dragged myself to my beat-up sedan, my body felt like it was carrying a ton of bricks. The exhaustion wasn't just mental, it was physical. Every muscle screamed, every joint throbbed. And I swear, my feet felt like they were on fire, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The double shifts at the bistro had left me drained, my skin soaked in the lingering scent of stale coffee and sanitizer that had clung to me all day, marking me as a help even when I was out of uniform. I leaned against the steering wheel for a moment, letting out a long breath that barely made a dent in the tension coiled in my chest. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and almost recoiled. Red-rimmed eyes, deep dark circles carved like bruises under them, a face that looked at least 10 years older than 32. I fumbled in my bag for concealer, swiping it over my face, trying to erase the fatigue just enough to look presentable. It was important tonight, always important when it came to Catherine. She had just finished her first semester of grad school with top marks, and this dinner was her celebration. I had sent her the money for the bill earlier that morning. $500 I scraped together from tips and a freelance logo design project I had stayed up 3 nights straight to finish. My whole week had been caffeine and hope. Hope that seeing her smile, her bright, unburdened smile, would make every overtime shift, every skipped meal, every aching back worth it. The drive over, I rehearsed the casual, happy tone I'd need to keep up. I couldn't show exhaustion or irritation, it would ruin the evening. But as I walked into the restaurant, a high-end Italian place with dim lighting and white tablecloths so crisp they could probably cut you, the sense of being out of place slammed me like a brick. My department store dress and sensible shoes suddenly felt painfully inadequate, my purse worn and frayed from years of use. Even the hostess, with her practiced polite disdain, made me feel smaller than I already did as she led me to the private booth at the back. There they were, my parents, all uncomfortable stiffness in their Sunday best, and Catherine glowing in that way money and lack of stress can buy. And then Julian, her boyfriend, handsome in a way that made you uncomfortable, like he owned the air around him. His jawline could cut glass, and that suit probably worth more than my car. He draped himself casually over the back of the booth, exuding confidence, possession, ease. "Fiona, you made it," Catherine said, bright but distant. She didn't stand to hug me, just gestured vaguely to the empty seat across from them. I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff, foreign even. "Happy celebration, Cat," I said, sliding in across from them, my voice carrying the effort of 1,000 rehearsed lines. "I'm so proud of you." She barely acknowledged me, already tuned into Julian and their conversation about summer trips, investments, and life I could barely afford to dream about. I sipped water, trying to stave off the hunger gnawing at my stomach. I'd sent money for the meal, sure, but the wine alone was probably enough to exceed it. I couldn't order much, couldn't risk my card being declined. I listened, smiled at the right moments, nodded politely. It was exhausting just to exist in their world. The world Catherine and Julian inhabited, and I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. A heavy, wet wool blanket I couldn't shake. My thoughts drifted to the hours I had spent working, scrapping together tips and freelance money to make this night possible. The desperation, the hope, the caffeine-fueled stamina that had brought me here, it all seemed like a cruel contrast to the ease with which they moved through life. Catherine's radiant glow, her laughter, the way Julian casually dominated the space, made me feel smaller with every passing second. And yet, despite everything, I clung to a fragile hope that tonight she would be happy, that she might remember why I'd done this, why I'd sacrificed so much, and maybe, just maybe, her smile would make the fatigue fade for a moment. But as the evening wore on, every polite nod, every forced smile, every careful sip of water felt like a reminder of the distance between us. I could smell the wine, the food, the luxury around me, and all I could think about was how much I had given to get her here, to celebrate her success, and how alien I felt in this world of wealth and ease. The anticipation I had clung to, that desperate hope that this would be a night of joy, wrestled with the reality of discomfort and exhaustion. Yet, even in that tension, I held on to the thought that Catherine deserved this, that somehow my efforts had carved out this moment for her. And that thought, fragile as it was, kept me upright as I navigated the quiet storm of my own fatigue and the unspoken tension that lingered between us. The moment I slid into the booth across from Catherine and Julian, I felt the room shrink. Julian was just starting to talk about his summer in Amalfi, his words smooth, practiced, like he was performing rather than speaking. My parents nodded politely, caught somewhere between pride and discomfort, while I clutched my water glass like a lifeline, trying to ground myself. I could feel every thread of exhaustion still clinging to me, but I had to mask it. Tonight was supposed to be about Catherine, her achievement, her celebration, but that mask shattered almost immediately. Julian's eyes, cold and assessing, flicked to me. "Don't you agree?" "Fiona," he asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. I felt my hand tighten around my glass. "I'm a graphic designer," I said quietly, careful not to let the tremor in my voice give me away. "But I pick up shifts at a bistro to make ends meet." The smirk on his lips made my stomach churn. That smirk was the kind that didn't just see you, it judged you, picked apart every flaw and mistake like it was a sport. Catherine laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves immediately. "Oh, Julian, don't mind her," she said, leaning back, her tone casual, but her words cut deeper than any blade. "Fiona is practically married to that apron. She loves the grind. Some people just don't have the vision for more." I froze. The noise of the restaurant seemed to recede into a muffled hum, leaving just the echo of those words in my ears. Some people just don't have the vision for more. And then, even sharper, Catherine leaned forward, her eyes locking with mine, and said it plainly. "Fee, you're 32. You're still working hourly jobs. You're always tired, always complaining about bills. It's a choice at this point. You're kind of a loser if we're being honest." A loser. The word tasted like ash in my mouth, sharp and bitter. My body went cold in an instant, like someone had yanked the warmth out of me. I wanted to stand up, shout, defend myself, but I felt rooted to the booth. My parents didn't say anything. My mom's hand hovered lightly on the table, hesitant, not daring to challenge her daughter. My father looked down at his plate, silent, a quiet retreat from confrontation. I could feel the betrayal, heavier than the fatigue that had weighed me down all day. Every sacrifice, every double shift, every meal skipped to ensure Catherine could have this life, all erased in a single sentence. I see, I said finally, my voice calm, low, more even than I felt. It didn't feel like my voice. It sounded alien even to me, detached, a stranger's voice. So, I'm a loser. I'm embarrassing you. Got it. Catherine rolled her eyes, dismissive. Don't be dramatic, Fiona. I'm just trying to help you. Julian says you need to cut off dead weight to fly. Maybe if you realized how pathetic your situation is, you'd actually do something about it. Stop playing the victim. The victim, I echoed, shock giving way to a burning ache in my chest. Julian watched me, smug, satisfied, like he was observing some insect trapped under glass. The audacity of it, the sheer gall of him, the way Catherine just laughed, embraced every word. It was like a physical blow. My heart hammered against my ribs, frantic, angry, raw. Every memory of nights spent waiting tables, the 4 years of tuition and rent I had covered, of shoes with holes in the soles, meals of instant noodles, all of it collided in that moment. And she had the nerve, the entitlement, to call me a loser. I wanted my parents to defend me, to slam their hands on the table, to remind Catherine what she owed me, what I had sacrificed. But they didn't. Their silence was deafening, thick, suffocating. The emotional fog I'd carried for years lifted in an instant, leaving a jagged landscape of clarity. I wasn't just exhausted or underappreciated, I was being used. And everyone at that table had bought into it, or at least turned a blind eye. Catherine sipped her wine, her eyes hard, almost gleaming with a challenge. Maybe if you realized how pathetic your situation is, she repeated, as if daring me to contradict her. Her words were carefully measured, rehearsed, polished for effect. Julian nodded slightly, the smallest hint of amusement flickering across his face. They had rehearsed this, and I had walked straight into the trap. I felt the blood drain from my face, my chest tightening with a cold fury. This wasn't just criticism, it was erasure. It was a declaration that everything I had done, every ounce of effort and love, was worthless in their eyes. I had carried her, literally and figuratively, for 6 years, and now she was happy, radiant, even glowing, while I was being mocked for my choices, my life, my existence. The weight of betrayal pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. I tried to swallow, tried to find a polite retort, a shred of defense, but the words stuck. I wanted to hit back, to scream, to let them feel for even a second what it felt like to be used, ignored, disrespected. But something in me shifted. The shock gave way to clarity. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just a victim of their cruelty. I could take control. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something that needed to happen. A reckoning long overdue. Catherine continued, oblivious, laughing at Julian's remarks, embracing the life I had funded for her. She didn't see me, the sister who had held her future in her hands, who had sacrificed, who had hoped that tonight she would be happy. I could see it now, the stark contrast between gratitude and entitlement, between love and manipulation. Julian was the architect of this new Catherine, shaping her perception, isolating her from the reality that I carried for her, the reality of what it took to put her here. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. It wasn't just about humiliation. It was about reclaiming control, about setting boundaries that had long been ignored, about protecting myself from the people who were meant to love me unconditionally, but had instead weaponized their gratitude and my generosity against me. The dinner continued, but I was already plotting in my mind, not with malice, but with precision. Every insult, every mocking glance, every word of derision was fuel. I knew what had to happen next. I had to act. Not just for pride, not just for revenge, but to draw the line once and for all, to protect myself, and perhaps, in some strange, twisted way, even her. The humiliation had done its work, stripping away the facade of family decorum, exposing the truth. And now, for the first time that evening, I could see a path forward clear, cold and deliberate. After the dinner, I sat in silence for a long time, just letting the weight of it all settle in. And I started thinking about the years behind me, the nights I worked 2 jobs, the weekends I gave up, the friends I missed, the weddings I couldn't afford to attend, all so Catherine could have her life uninterrupted. I hadn't just been a sister, I'd been her safety net, her protector, the one making sure she could focus on school, on her dreams, while I carried the burden. And for a long time, she'd been grateful, or at least she pretended to be. But then Julian appeared. It was like a cloud had passed in, subtle at first, but soon his influence was impossible to ignore. He showed up 3 months ago, claiming to be some venture capitalist consultant, all buzzwords and slick confidence. He drove a leased Porsche, and his presence alone seemed to shift Catherine. I watched her change. It wasn't overnight, but the transformation was chilling. She started criticizing my clothes, mocking our parents' small rental house, using words like equity and leverage that she barely understood. And I realized, with this cold knot in my stomach, that it wasn't just teenage rebellion or ambition, it was manipulation. Julian had planted himself in her world and was quietly reshaping it, shaping her perception of me and everything I'd done. I remember the first time I fully understood what was happening. He laughed at me when I deflected his question about how much I made. "That's cute," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. It was like he didn't just dismiss me. He rewrote my existence in that moment. And Catherine, she didn't even blink. She laughed along with him. The girl who had once looked at me with love and trust now saw me as some outdated relic, someone holding her back. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult. I'd funded her tuition, her apartment, her fancy dinners, all with my sweat and sleepless nights. I had buried myself to ensure she had a life I couldn't give myself. And now, seeing her morph into someone I barely recognized, laughing at the very person who had carried her, it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck of everything I had sacrificed. I felt frustration boiling in me, not just anger at Julian, though he was infuriating, but a deep, exhausting frustration at the helplessness of watching my sister fall for it. She was smart, capable, but he had isolated her, feeding her ego, detaching her from reality. And the worst part, she believed him. She believed she was special, that I was holding her back. that my sacrifices somehow made me weak. I felt every ounce of responsibility, the years of effort, the nights spent hustling, all being twisted into justification for her disdain. It was suffocating. I kept replaying moments in my mind, the late nights spent transferring money, the small victories when she smiled at me without realizing the cost behind it. And now, the sharp, clear realization that those smiles had been manipulated, that her happiness had been hijacked by someone who saw her as a trophy, not a sister. Julian wasn't just a bad influence, he was a predator in a tailored suit, feeding on her insecurity and my love for her. He didn't care about her, not really. He cared about control, about appearances, about someone to look up to him and spend money he hadn't earned. And Catherine, blissfully unaware, became the perfect vehicle for his con. And I sat there, exhausted, not just from work, but from carrying this invisible load, feeling the emotional weight of years of sacrifice colliding with the present reality. How do you watch someone you love slowly turn against you? Not out of malice, but because they've been convinced to see you as the enemy. It was frustrating, heart-wrenching, and yet strangely clarifying. I realized that love alone wasn't enough anymore. My protection, my support, it had to be paired with action, with boundaries, or it would all be lost. I had to accept that the person I had been supporting for years had changed. And part of me needed to change too, to respond in a way that was measured and deliberate, not just emotionally reactive. Frustration mingled with clarity. The responsibility I carried, the sacrifices, the years of hidden labor, all of it suddenly felt like a strategic map. I understood what had to be done. This wasn't just about hurt feelings, it was about taking control of a situation that had been allowed to spiral, about protecting both myself and, in a way, my sister from the consequences of her own manipulated choices. It was exhausting to even think about. But I knew one thing: I couldn't let Julian's influence continue to erode our relationship or my sense of self. And so, slowly, painfully, I began to plot the first steps of reclaiming that control. Knowing the path ahead would be tense, messy, and necessary, that night, after the dinner, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at Catherine's latest text. She was asking for money again this time for some weekend trip to Napa with Julian, and I couldn't. Not anymore. The words from the restaurant echoed in my head. Her laughter, Julian's smug smirk, the way they had made me feel invisible, expendable. I took a deep breath, the first calm breath I'd taken in days, and realized that if I didn't take control now, nothing would ever change. It wasn't about revenge, it was about finally drawing a line. I opened my laptop and logged into the joint account I had painstakingly maintained for years. It was always called Catherine's Future, a cruelly ironic title at this point. I scrolled through the transactions, each line a reminder of what I had sacrificed thousands of dollars in tuition, rent, bills, even small luxuries. She probably didn't even think about: sushi, spa treatments, clothes I couldn't afford for myself, my own checking account barely enough to survive. The sense of betrayal was sharp, but underneath it all, a strange clarity settled over me. I wasn't powerless. I was a signatory. I held the keys, and for the first time, I understood the weight and the power of that responsibility. I went step by step, deliberate, almost ritualistic. First, the scheduled transfers, monthly rent, Tuition, weekly allowance cancel, confirm, cancel, confirm. One by one, the automatic support vanished. Then I moved to account settings, removed Catherine as an authorized user. Processing. Success. Her access was gone. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension drain out of me in a slow exhale. Relief washed over me. A solid, grounding kind of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying someone else's life on my back. I felt like I'd taken a deep, refreshing breath after being underwater too long. But I didn't stop there. There was the apartment, the luxury condo she called home. I picked up the phone, dialing Mr. Henderson, the landlord who had always liked me because I had been reliable, responsible. I explained everything calmly. I was terminating the lease at the end of the billing cycle, covering any early termination fees. There was a pause on the line, a note of concern, but he understood. Step 1, complete. The roof over her head had become a ticking clock, and the responsibility for it had shifted firmly back to her. And then there was Julian, the man who had so casually mocked my life, who had whispered poisonous ideas into my sister's ear. He had to be exposed, methodically. I opened new tabs, dug into every trace of his online existence. LinkedIn profiles filled with buzzwords and empty promises. Court records that showed nothing of his supposed wealth. Old social media accounts abandoned and telling a very different story. Slowly, the picture became clear. No investments, no companies, no money. Just a man pretending, manipulating, preying on my sister. Every discovery tightened the knot of resolve in my stomach. I documented everything: screenshots, saved files, a growing dossier of evidence. I wasn't acting out of malice. I was being precise, strategic, and deliberate. The morning after the dinner, the house was unnervingly quiet. Normally, my mornings were chaos: emails, schedules, freelance work, bar prep. Today, nothing. I made coffee and sipped it slowly, enjoying the stillness, the absence of obligation for the first time in years. When I finally checked my phone, notifications poured in: missed calls, texts from Catherine, worried messages from my mom. I ignored them all. The only message that mattered was the automated email from the bank: scheduled transfer. Failed. Insufficient authorization. The relief was almost dizzying. A stark contrast to the tension of the past few days. I had taken the first step, and it felt like stepping out of a storm into sunlight. I mapped out my next moves carefully, each step measured, deliberate. Apartment notice sent, tuition and allowance canceled, Julian's deception documented. I wasn't lashing out. I was reclaiming control. Every click, every call, every confirmed action was a small but vital assertion of autonomy. I wasn't reactive. I was strategic. The adrenaline that had kept me awake and anxious for weeks now fueled clarity, focus, and a sense of power that I hadn't felt in years. By afternoon, the shift in my own mindset was palpable. The anger had not disappeared, but it was tempered by precision. I was no longer at the mercy of their whims. I had set the boundaries. I had defined the limits. And as I leaned back, laptop closed, hands resting lightly on my knees, I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of relief. The control I had claimed was not reckless or impulsive. It was necessary, long overdue, and empowering in ways that made the past sacrifices feel purposeful rather than futile. For the first time in years, I felt free, free from the constant drain, free from the manipulation, free from being the silent, exhausted enabler of a sister and a boyfriend who had no real understanding or appreciation for what they were taking. It was a quiet victory, but a monumental one. The path ahead would still be tense and fraught with confrontation. But I had acted decisively, calmly, and strategically. And in that calm, measured action, I finally felt something I hadn't in a long time: empowerment. My life was mine again. And that made every exhausting night, every betrayal, and every frustration worth it. After I had closed Catherine off financially and handled the apartment, there was Julian, the man who had so smugly dismissed me, mocked my work ethic, and turned my sister into a version of herself I barely recognized. I knew I couldn't just hope for him to disappear. I needed proof. I needed the truth in black and white. I booted up my laptop, opened a fresh browser window, and started digging. Not frantically, not emotionally methodically. Every click was deliberate, every search carefully crafted. I was a detective in my own home, and Julian had left a trail, whether he knew it or not. I started with what I had: his name and a few details from the dinner, including that he claimed to be some kind of venture capitalist consultant. LinkedIn was first, and the results were telling. Buzzwords everywhere: visionary, angel investor, blockchain enthusiast, but no concrete companies, no real positions, nothing that matched the lifestyle he was flashing. I leaned back, squinting at the screen. Really, a Porsche and a penthouse from that LinkedIn profile. Sure, John. The lack of substance was glaring, and the audacity to show up at a family dinner like he owned the place was somehow both infuriating and comical. Next, I hit public record databases, cross-referencing his supposed hometown, his alleged business ventures, and his family. The results were sparse. No LLCs, no registered corporations, nothing resembling old money. Just an address in a garden-style apartment complex near a community college and a record of a 2012 Honda Civic. I laughed dryly, shaking my head. The man had been crafting a story so elaborate, so precise, and yet it fell apart under a few keystrokes. Then came court records, civil judgments, small claims, nothing in his favor. Everything pointing toward unpaid debts and lawsuits filed by women who had fallen into the same trap. He was a grifter, preying on ambition and insecurity, dressing it up in designer labels and charm. I kept a running folder on my desktop: screenshots, PDFs, social media accounts, business registry searches, even old forum posts warning about him. The evidence was mounting, and with each piece, the picture became painfully, hilariously clear. Julian Bain, or whatever he was calling himself that week, was not a consultant, not a venture capitalist, not an investor. He was a con man with good posture and a leased sports car. I dug deeper into abandoned social media profiles and found photos from parties, cheap vacations, and some get-rich-quick seminar videos he had reposted. No Amalfi Coast yachts, no private jets. Just a guy in a Honda Civic pretending to live someone else's life. It was almost unbelievable, the level of deception. I had to pinch myself to remember I wasn't exaggerating. He had manipulated my sister, isolated her from reality, all while portraying himself as someone untouchable. I kept taking screenshots, naming files. Clearly, Julian_proof1, courtdocs_JB, X_DMs. Every click felt like building armor. Every document another brick in the wall of truth. I also found the smoking gun a forum post from 6 months ago warning about him. A user called him out for convincing women to take out loans for investments that never existed, for disappearing with their money. I read it twice, the hairs on my arms standing up. That was exactly what he was doing to Catherine, though unknowingly. I had been the one funding her life. The layers of manipulation, entitlement, and audacity made my jaw ache from tension. And yet, a small part of me couldn't help but laugh. I mean, who scams in such an overtly theatrical way? It was absurd, like a bad sitcom plot, except the stakes were real. By now, my desk was cluttered with open tabs, print screens, PDFs, and notes. I was meticulous, deliberate, building a dossier so airtight that there could be no question of Julian's lies. Every claim he made, every facade, had a counterpoint in my evidence. I even started labeling sections: source of income, lifestyle versus reality, court records, ex-victim accounts. The organization gave me a strange sense of calm. The chaos of the past week, the humiliation, the exhaustion, the betrayal was now channeled into something I could control, something I could use. I paused for a moment, letting my eyes drift around the room. The apartment was still, quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of power, of agency. The anger that had burned so hot earlier was now tempered by focus. This wasn't just about revenge or making a point. It was about clarity, about showing reality for what it was. Julian had preyed on my sister's ambitions and naivety, but I had the tools to dismantle the illusion. I had the receipts, literally and figuratively. The more I documented, the more I realized the extent of his deception, not just financial, but emotional. He had isolated Catherine, reshaping her worldview, convincing her I was the problem, that she was owed the world, and yet, through all this, he was oblivious to me. He didn't see the sister who had quietly funded her life, who had sacrificed every weekend, every hour, every ounce of energy. That invisibility, his underestimation of me, was my advantage. He hadn't accounted for the person who knew the full picture, who had proof, who had patience. Hours passed like minutes. Each new piece of evidence brought a rush of satisfaction tempered by disbelief at his audacity. And through it all, the narration in my head stayed calm, deliberate, almost conversational. This is the guy who called me dead weight. This is the guy who belittled me. This is the guy who manipulated my sister. And now, here's the proof. I organized it meticulously into a folder I called The Reset. Each screenshot, each record, each DM from his ex-victim placed like pieces in a chess game. The realization hit me fully. Julian's manipulation was extensive. Yes, but not unassailable. He had overplayed his hand, and I had the tools, the knowledge, and the patience to expose it. By the time I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Julian's smirk, Catherine's laughter, the humiliation of the dinner, they were no longer chains. They were fuel. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and most importantly, I had my calm, measured mind. The storm that had engulfed my life was still there, but I had found a way to navigate it, to turn the chaos into strategy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt empowered. Dangerous in a very quiet, controlled way, and ready for the confrontation that would inevitably follow. I arrived at the family barbecue later than usual. wanting to make sure everyone was in place. The air was thick with the familiar scent of charcoal and sweet marinades, the sounds of laughter and chatter echoing across the backyard. My aunt, uncle, 2 cousins, my parents, Catherine and Julian were all seated around the patio table, their faces a mix of curiosity and complacency. I didn't bother greeting anyone. Instead, I walked straight to the head of the table, the red binder tucked under my arm like a shield, like a weapon. Catherine looked up, smug as ever, her new dress crisp and expensive, undoubtedly purchased with money I had painstakingly earned. Julian lounged next to her, the picture of confidence and charm, still unaware that his carefully constructed illusion was about to crumble. I placed the red binder on the glass tabletop with a heavy thud, the sound cutting through the casual chatter like a knife. The table went silent immediately. "We were just talking about how you were going to apologize," Catherine said, her voice attempting casualness. But her eyes flicked nervously toward Julian, seeking reinforcement. I ignored her, letting the silence stretch, letting everyone feel the weight of what was about to happen. My parents looked confused, my aunt skeptical. Julian raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. He had no idea. I opened the binder deliberately, flipping it to the first section. "I am confused about one thing," I said, my voice steady, projecting across the yard. "Why is Julian Vance sitting at this table eating my father's food when he owes $45,000 to 3 different creditors?" Julian froze, fork halfway to his mouth, eyes darting to the pages. I repeated slowly. "Julian Vance, not Bain, not some LinkedIn fantasy. Your civil court judgments. Right here." I held up the page with the official court documents. 3 judgments clear as day. Credit card debt, 2 unpaid personal loans from women he had dated. Is this your investment strategy? Julian dating women and stealing their money? Julian's face went from smug to shocked. He stammered, waving his hands. These are forged. Who do you think you are?" I snapped, cutting him off, my tone sharp and controlled. "Sit down, now." The authority in my voice shocked him and the rest of the table into silence. For the first time that evening, I had the power in the room. I turned my gaze to my parents. "Mom, Dad, you think I stole Catherine's money? Look at this." I flipped to the next section of the binder, showing my deposits from the bistro and freelance work, each one clearly labeled with my name, date, amount, source of funds, all documented meticulously over 4 years. Every dollar she spent on sushi, on Sephora, on her apartment, it was money I earned, not inherited, not given by anyone else. Me, Fiona. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for the pages, her eyes scanning the numbers, absorbing the truth. I moved to the expenditure section next. I placed the pages so everyone could see. While I was eating instant ramen and living in a small, drafty apartment, Catherine spent $300 at Sephora, $400 at a spa, every detail documented, every purchase traced back to me. This is what I've done for her. This is the sacrifice that has gone unacknowledged. I looked at Catherine. The smugness was gone, replaced by pale shock. Her mouth hung slightly open, her eyes wide. She couldn't form words. She had never expected the binder, the evidence, the meticulous exposure of her entitlement. Finally, I turned to the last section, the messages from Julian's ex-victim. Here is someone who trusted him, took out a loan for a supposed investment, and he vanished. I said, holding the screenshots up for all to see. Sound familiar? Mom, Catherine asked you for money for a deposit. My father's eyes flicked between Julian and the pages, his gentle demeanor mixed with anger. He looked at Julian, searching for a sign of truth. Is this true? He asked, voice low, quiet but firm. Julian faltered, trying to maintain his composure, but it was gone. The veneer cracked. Julian tried to speak, to deflect. Fiona, you're clearly mentally unstable. These documents are doctored. You don't know what you're doing. I cut him off. What's the name of your firm, your EIN, your business address? State records show nothing. You have no legitimacy. Nothing you've said is real. He sputtered, the confident facade collapsing. You're crazy, he spat, voice cracking. You can't prove anything. I leaned forward, keeping my tone calm, deliberate. The tap is dry. The bank is closed permanently. Your games are over. If you really loved her, you'd support her, but we both know you won't because you're broke. The room was silent, heavy, every eye fixed on Julian as the evidence stacked around him like bricks. He turned to Catherine, desperation creeping in. Come on, Kat, we're leaving, he said. She sat frozen, her gaze flicking between him, the binder, and me. For the first time, she saw the sweat on his brow, the cheapness of his suit, the panic behind the veneer. Her voice was barely a whisper. He lied, she said, disbelief in every syllable. I closed the binder. Yes, and so did you. You lied to Mom and Dad about me. You called me a thief. She broke into tears, ugly, heaving sobs, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, I wanted to be someone. He made me feel special. I said nothing. The anger had gone, but the love hadn't returned. There was just a hollow space where my sister used to be. I turned to my parents. Check your accounts, change your passwords. And Catherine, the eviction notice stands. You have 27 days. Julian had no words, no leverage, no charm left. The silence of accountability stretched across the yard. The latch on the gate clicked as Julian stormed out, the last vestige of his control gone. Catherine sat alone, crumpled, faced with the consequences of her choices. I felt a strange, cold clarity, a sense of completion, the betrayal, the humiliation, the exhaustion. It had all led to this reckoning, and it was finally over. The family barbecue had become the stage for truth, exposure, and the first step toward realignment for everyone involved. After the confrontation at the barbecue, life began to shift in subtle, yet profound ways. Catherine was no longer the untouchable, radiant version of herself I had known. She moved back home into her childhood bedroom, a small, familiar space that now felt both grounding and humbling. The luxury apartment, the designer dresses, the constant indulgences, they were gone, stripped away by the reality she had refused to see for so long. I watched her navigate this new normal, her steps hesitant at first, her gaze often downcast, aware now of the privileges she had taken for granted. She wasn't just humbled, she was confronted with the consequences of her actions. The life I had quietly funded and she had almost destroyed with entitlement. The first few weeks were awkward. We didn't speak much, and when we did, the conversations were tentative. She would glance at me with a mixture of guilt and uncertainty, testing the waters of this new dynamic, trying to find a way to acknowledge what had happened without fully admitting the debt she owed not just in money, but in recognition and respect. Then, one afternoon, she showed up at my door, an envelope in hand. I took it without a word, my expression neutral. Inside was $300, her first paycheck from a real, honest job. She looked at her shoes, embarrassed, voice small. "It's not much, but I want to start paying you back," she said. I could feel the magnitude of that gesture. Small in dollars, but enormous in intention. It was the first real acknowledgement that she understood the weight of my sacrifices. I placed the envelope on the table and nodded. "Thank you," I said simply. She looked up, eyes glistening. "I was so insecure, and he just fed on that. I treated you like dirt, and you were the only one holding me up." Her voice cracked, the shame spilling into words. I simply listened, letting her recognize the truth, letting her feel the lessons that had taken so long to land. "Yes, you did," I said, quietly. "And yes, I was. We aren't best friends again, not yet, but we're learning slowly." It was a fragile truce, the beginning of a reconstruction, where trust could be rebuilt piece by piece. Meanwhile, Julian was no longer a figure looming over our lives. I had forwarded all the information I had gathered on him to the State Attorney General's Fraud Division. Last I heard, he was facing charges for soliciting investments without a license, and the network of lies he had woven for so long was finally unraveling. He hadn't been living in a penthouse. He hadn't been the venture capitalist he claimed to be. His carefully constructed empire of charm and deceit was collapsing. And for once, the universe seemed to be handing out a kind of quiet justice. It was satisfying, yes, but not in a vengeful way, more like relief. A lifting of the oppressive weight he had brought into our lives. As for me, the change was deeper than just external circumstances. I finally quit the bar, my third job, the endless grind that had defined my life for years. With Catherine off my payroll, my design income was sufficient to support myself comfortably. I moved into a nicer apartment, one with a balcony and sunlight spilling in across the floor, a space that felt like mine, fully and unapologetically. Weekends off were no longer a luxury, they were a reality I allowed myself to enjoy. I even started dating again, tentatively, dipping my toes back into the world that I had neglected for so long. And yes, I bought myself a new dress. Not for a party, not for anyone else. Just for me. A celebration of independence, of reclaiming agency over my own life. The lessons I carried with me from the ordeal were multifaceted. First, loyalty has limits. There is a difference between supporting someone and enabling entitlement. I had learned that hard over years of sacrifice, that blind devotion can be exploited, and that recognizing the boundary between love and self-preservation is crucial. Second, self-respect is non-negotiable. I had allowed the humiliation and disregard to persist because I valued the perception of myself as a caretaker above my own needs. Once I asserted my boundaries, once I acted decisively, the liberation was tangible. Catherine was learning too, slowly, sometimes painfully. She began to understand the real cost of her lifestyle, the work, the missed sleep, the mental and emotional labor that had sustained her for years. Each installment she paid back was not just money returned, it was a lesson internalized. She learned, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with tears, that entitlement has consequences, that respect and gratitude are earned, and that relationships are built on trust and recognition, not just proximity or blood. I watched her navigate this reckoning with a mix of distance and care, knowing that forgiveness and reconciliation are slow processes. We weren't friends in the old sense, but there was a tentative understanding forming, a recognition of truth, an acknowledgement of past actions, a willingness to rebuild, however imperfectly. It was uncomfortable at times, but also necessary. And I realized, with a quiet satisfaction, that I could hold firm in my own boundaries while still allowing room for growth and learning in others. The empowerment I felt extended beyond family dynamics. I invested more time and energy into my career, finally taking freelance projects that excited me rather than just kept the lights on. I allowed myself the small luxuries I had denied for years, not extravagance, just comfort, stability, and the joy of a life earned through my own effort. Weekends became time for rest and reflection, not for anxiety over someone else's choices or financial mismanagement. I felt lighter, more in control, more present in my own life, and the perspective on Julian, his lies, and the toxicity he had introduced into our lives reinforced the importance of vigilance and discernment. Trust is precious, but it must be earned, and actions, not words, are the true indicators of character. The elaborate facade he had constructed could not withstand scrutiny, and exposing it became an exercise in clarity, precision, and, surprisingly, a sense of justice. I realized that investing in oneself, protecting one's resources, time, and emotional energy is not selfish. It is essential. It is the foundation for any healthy relationship, familial or otherwise. Months passed. Catherine continued to work, saving, paying back what she owed, and slowly rebuilding her own independence without relying on me or Julian. The humility and lessons seemed to take root. Our interactions, once fraught with tension and unspoken resentment, became more grounded, cautious, and honest. I saw glimpses of the sister I had loved, tempered now with an awareness that respect and accountability are not optional. And I, in turn, felt more capable, more confident, and more free than I had in years. Looking back, the entire ordeal had been exhausting, emotionally and physically, but transformative. The humiliation, betrayal, and manipulation I endured revealed not weakness, but resilience, patience, and the importance of clarity in action. The red binder, the meticulous documentation, the strategic decisions, they weren't just about exposing lies. They were about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. The power of truth, when wielded carefully, can reshape relationships, establish boundaries, and create space for growth and healing. In the end, the story wasn't just about betrayal or financial manipulation. It was about what it means to protect oneself, to hold others accountable, and to invest in your own life. Sometimes, the highest return on effort is not in the sacrifices made for others, but in the self-respect and stability you reclaim by cutting losses and asserting boundaries. Loyalty is essential, but it must be reciprocated. Love is vital, but it cannot exist at the expense of your own well-being. I had learned to balance these truths, to navigate the difficult, messy space between compassion and self-preservation. As I sit in my new apartment, the morning light streaming across the floor, coffee in hand, I can finally say that I am at peace. Catherine is learning. Julian is facing consequences, and I am thriving. I have stability, independence, and the ability to breathe without the constant weight of financial or emotional drain. And the greatest lesson of all, sometimes the best investment you can make is in yourself. And the highest return comes when you finally cut your losses, assert your boundaries, and choose your own path. It isn't easy. It isn't always painless, but it is worth it. And that's the story: years of sacrifice, betrayal, and ultimately reclaiming control and self-respect. Life threw a lot at me, but setting boundaries, standing up for myself, and investing in my own growth made all the difference. Catherine is learning. I've found stability, and Julian faced the consequences of his deception. If this story resonated with you, consider hitting like or subscribing to follow along. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, sometimes the bravest step